All right, Amy Morris, thank you so much. I am indeed Kaylee Lyons in Washington. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Balance of Power, where we not only balance power, we also balance how politics and the markets intersect. And on that note, one of the top stories on the Bloomberg terminal today has a headline that reads as follows. Harris's rise in polls has investors rethinking Trump trade bets. Essentially, the idea here is that Wall Street is adjusting its bets around the election of Donald Trump, who was once, of course, seen as the presumptive favorite, now seems to be much more in competition with Vice President Kamala Harris, as her 5-week-old candidacy has seen a surge in her polling relative to where Biden was before he dropped out of the race in July. But there are still 10 weeks to go, 70 days from today's election day to be exact. So a lot could still change. And we wanted to take stock of where exactly we are and our understanding of what each of these candidates, if they were to be elected president, would actually mean for financial markets and, yes, for crypto. So for that, we turn to Nathan Dean. He is Senior U.S. Policy Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, is here with me in our Washington studio. So, Nathan, I'm sure you're already fielding a lot of questions around this election from clients. Anyone who calls you probably wants to know if you have a feeling about what way this is going to go. My question is, are markets amiss to put too much attention on specifically who wins the presidency, when the reality is that they're very limited in what they're going to be able to do unless they sweep Congress along with them?
Yeah, so it's this idea of the Trump trade and the Harris equivalent, whatever we can think of for that. But really, there's two things to think about. One is the sector. So if you think if Kamala Harris wins, renewable energy is probably going to be cemented by the IRA status over the next few years. So they are going to be protected by whatever policy that would seek to detract from their earnings going forward. So you have the sector level. But then you have the macro level. And when it comes to whether President Trump wins or Kamala Harris wins, the question ultimately is, what's the control of Congress that goes with that? And so, we've seen a lot of the Trump trade talk, for example, in that piece talks about a unified Congress with the presidency. So President Trump wins and the Republicans get the House and the Senate. Then they have this idea that they can use reconciliation to do grandiose, big, broad message bills. Same thing could be if Kamala Harris wins and the Democrats take the House and the Senate. And so that's where you get a lot of the market moving inflation bills, if you will. So I think that's the macro level aspect of this piece.
Well, and I actually wonder if the ultimate outcomes for markets might be the same, even if the policy route to get there might be different, if it's a red sweep or a blue sweep. Like if it's a red sweep, major tax cuts, potentially adding trillions of dollars to the deficit through that. Obviously, that has its own inflationary effect. If you get Harris, you get more subsidies. For example, $25,000 payments for first-time home buyers to help with the down payments specifically. Both of them could bring no tax on tips. Aren't we talking either way if they have congressional cooperation of deficit increasing, inflation increasing policies either way?
Absolutely. So let's just play this out.
Yeah.
If Vice President Harris wins and the Democrats get a pretty decent size in Congress, you are going to essentially see more subsidies, additional, think of Inflation Reduction Act 2.0, money that's going out either through the carrot side or directly out to help subsidize sectors, communities, and so forth. If President Trump wins and you get these tax cuts, if you will, and remember, 2025 is going to be a tax debate no matter who wins.
Yeah.
If the tax cuts come in, again, that's more money that's going out into the pocketbook of the individual American, because those Trump-era tax cuts expire at the end of 2025, most likely will continue. And President Trump has even said the corporate tax rate would like to go down to 15%. So ultimately, that outcome is the same. And so from this Trump trade talk and this, Wall Street thinking of it, ultimately is whatever side wins the White House would ultimately have to win both the House and the Senate to go with it. If you get a gridlock Congress, everything that we just discussed is going to be tempered, negotiated, and much smaller. And so this grandiose idea of inflations or deficits or anything like that gets pushed down into just, more sector level specific bills.
Okay, fair enough. I do want to zero in more on tax policy, though, because tax cut advocates, if you will, that I've spoken with have said the majority of what is expiring are actually tax cuts that Democrats may want to preserve for not corporations necessarily, as there was a permanence to those, but this notion of small businesses, for example, or people of certain income brackets that Democrats may be more sympathetic to in terms of lowering or keeping their tax rates low. So I wonder, Nathan, how much, assuming we do have a divided Congress, if we're operating in the world which everyone thinks is most likely, you have a question around the presidency, but a red Senate and a blue House, flipping both chambers. Are we likely to still see some of the same outcomes even in a divided government, because there are going to be at least enough Democrats who want to cross the line to preserve what Trump passed in 2017.
Absolutely. I think, our general philosophy is, and this is with Andrew Silverman, our tax analyst, we were discussing this, our general philosophy is that most of the tax cuts that are expiring at the 2025 are going to continue. Nobody wants to be seen changing tax cuts for individuals, post an election year. Go back to George H.W. Bush, read my lips, no new taxes. That didn't really work out well for him. And so if Kamala Harris wins, you're going to see Democrats pushing for these tax cuts to remain. If President Trump wins, they may try and go a little bit further, but ultimately, again, may negotiate. So, when it comes to this whole tax debate, it really is, how do you pay for this? Is it the SALT deduction for those of you in New York and New Jersey?
Yeah.
Is it the corporate tax rate? Does this go up to 22% as opposed to the current 21%? So they're going to have to negotiate over how you're going to pay for it. So there's going to be small nuanced details, but ultimately we do think that this tax cut of President Trump from 2017 will continue on, and you may see another version of it for the next 10 years or so.
Well, it's not just tax cuts that Donald Trump says he wants, but he wants to be a crypto president this time around. It seems he wants all Bitcoin mined in the U.S., wants it to be the crypto capital of the world. How should we be thinking specifically about the crypto policies of each of these candidates, knowing the Biden administration hasn't necessarily been crypto enthusiastic, shall we say? There's regulators who have been quite hostile to the industry. Is Harris likely to create some separation, or will it be more of the same?
It's going to be very close. Ironically, when it comes to the legislative side of the crypto debate, we think that Kamala Harris is somewhat close to President Trump in terms of, because it's going to be driven by Congress. It's not going to be driven by the White House. So we actually have decent odds. We have 60% chance under a Harris presidency, 70% chance under a Trump presidency. That's something that looks like the Financial Innovation and Technology Act, can pass next year. This gives the SEC authority over securities, CFTC authority over commodities, additional stablecoin language. Now, that's the legislative side. The regulatory side can be different. We don't think Gary Gensler is going to stick around at the SEC.
Harris wouldn't keep him in there, you think?
We don't think so. Not for, maybe for a couple months while they work through the other nominations, just to make sure that it doesn't go to a 2-2 SEC. But if Chairman Gary Gensler moves on and somebody else comes in, the regulatory side may be different. We don't know who that person would be under a Harris presidency. Under a Trump presidency, we would have to imagine it's somebody that would move forward with a rulemaking to conduct, saying, here's additional clarity on how the SEC approach to crypto is. Ultimately, though, we think the crypto policy is somewhat favorable to firms, no matter who you get, Harris or Trump. But just remember, it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of costs associated with it. So some people in the crypto world may not like it, but for those established firms, and we see this all the time, they usually grab up market share to the small mom and pops. They're going to have to pay for this crypto framework, but they'll, I think, ultimately get it.
Well, and to your point about a lot of this is going to have to start in Congress. They will actually write the laws which dictate which regulator has what authority. I think that probably is part of the reason why we're seeing Fairshake, for example, these crypto super PACs, which have literally over $100 million to dispose in this election, are doing so in the down ballot races. They're focusing on, say, the Senate race in Ohio, which is the current banking chair, Sherrod Brown, up against Bernie Moreno, who is a crypto guy himself. How are you watching the way money is flowing and ultimately the way crypto money could actually impact the ultimate balance of Congress?
Well, this race is going to be, and I say race, this election is going to be extremely close in so many different races. Presidential, the Ohio Senate race, like you just mentioned, the Montana, the Nevada Senate races, extremely close. When you're talking about 100 to 150 million Americans are going to be voting, and ultimately 200,000 Americans across 7 swing states are going to decide who the next president is, the crypto PACs that are out there say, hey, you know what, maybe out of those 200,000, we've got 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 who are going to vote on our issue. So it's extremely important that, you are going to have a subset of crypto voters out there, and it may drive the Ohio race, for example. But we are going to see that the crypto folks are moving into the House down ballot races, because just remember, we have 3 separate but equal branches of government. And so even though the president will come out and say, I want to do this on crypto, the folks on the other hand, on the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue down at Capitol Hill would love to say, well, we're going to write the law and we're going to send it to the White House.
Yeah.
We're just as important.
Well, just finally on that, it is worth pointing out, Congress still has a few legislative weeks at least to work with once they come back, deal with the government shutdown issue. Really, we're talking the lame duck session here where we may be able to see things get done. Do you think Fit 21 works its way through the Senate before this Congress is out? Will we see any crypto legislation passed?
No, actually, I just ate crow on the terminal figuratively earlier this week when I said that I lowered my odds of a stablecoin bill passing this year. I don't think it's going to happen in the lame duck. And the reason being is we've been waiting for a lot of language. Senator Schumer said he wants to get something done. I think that was just, in advance of just the Kamala Harris reset, if you will. But I think during the lame duck session, both Democrats and Republicans will think they can get a better deal next year, and so they'll wait.
Fair enough. It was interesting that Chuck Schumer was on the Crypto for Harris Zoom call earlier this month, along with the people you'd think would be usual suspects, like Congressman Wiley Nickel of North Carolina, for example. Of course, a friend of this program, as is Nathan Dean, senior U.S. policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Thank you so much. As always, if Joe were here, he'd be referring to him as dad, but I will just stick with Nathan Dean from Bloomberg Intelligence. We still have much more ahead on this